So, some fascinating research on the future of news, and you've seen the data. This panel is about not data, but really some of the role models who represent the future of news. And we brought some of the icons of journalism with us today. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself and your outlet that you represent, as well as your title. But more importantly, each of you have made a mark in journalism, and more importantly, in society. Some of you have risked your lives. Some of you have created movements. Some of you have literally changed the world. And we'd like to start off and just level set and understand the mark you've made on journalism and why. And so introduce yourself and talk about your claim to fame, if you could.
Oh, gosh.
And Hannah, we'll start with you. No pressure.
Yeah, wow. I'm Hannah Beckler. I'm a senior editor on the investigations team at Business Insider. Most recently, I reported on how 8 states continue to use attack-trained dogs as a use of force against people who are incarcerated. So 295 people were attacked by dogs in recent years. But fortunately, because of the reporting, I think, Virginia has passed a new law that will significantly restrict the use of those dogs.
Jay.
My name is Jay Conti. I'm the general counsel at Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, and I am just the lawyer guy. I have no claim to fame. It's like I'm posing as a journalist up here. It's ridiculous. I'm just the lawyer. So I'm going to throw that out there. The best story I probably did was in college.
You're representing a very important journalist on our lapel pins here, though.
Well, that part is true. But I was a failed journalist in college, and I did the next best thing, which is to be a lawyer for journalists. So that's how I ended up here. But yes, I'm the general counsel of the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, and Evan Gershkovich is on our mind every single day. Today is day 413 of his wrongful incarceration in Russia, and it's time to get him out. And so we're trying to do everything we possibly can to get him out. So I would say that is the thing that has motivated us for every single one of those 413 days, and is a reminder of the importance of journalism and the people who put their necks on the line to get the story and to get it right, which leads right to our next.
Absolutely,
panelist.
it's a good segue to Jason.
I'm Jason Rezaian. I'm a columnist at the Washington Post. Previously, I was our bureau chief in Tehran in Iran until I was arrested at gunpoint with my wife from our home, taken into custody and held hostage for about a year and a half. I was the name on one of these pins about a decade ago, and I think at that time, a lot of us in this industry thought that that was an anomaly. Unfortunately, it was a foreshadowing. And I guess in my current capacity as a columnist at the Post, I'm deeply engaged in press freedom issues generally, but also issues around hostage taking and how to resolve it. Jay sells himself short and the lawyers short. As a guy that was sitting in a prison cell on the other side of the world, I hope desperately that the Post's lawyers were working day and night on my behalf, and they were. And I'm forever thankful for that, and super hopeful that Evan gets out well before he hits 544 days, which is the amount of time I spent in prison.
Thank you. Josh?
Hey, I'm Josh Gerstein. I'm a senior legal affairs reporter with Politico. It's a little difficult to follow Jason because I can't offer any similar story of physical danger and difficulty that he went through and that Evan Gershkovich from the Journal is going through right now. But a couple years ago, along with a colleague, Alex Ward, a couple years ago this month, we published a story about the then forthcoming decision from the Supreme Court on Dobbs that there was going to be a reversal, or it looked like there would be a reversal after almost half a century of precedent guaranteeing women a constitutional right to abortion in the United States, that the Supreme Court was going to retreat from that by a 5-4 margin. It was a pretty sensitive story, and it, I think, changed perceptions of the Supreme Court, not just because of what the story said, but really changed the sense of which people had about the role of the Supreme Court as a political actor in our society, and it prompted news organizations, including my own and a number of others, to really recalibrate the way they approach that branch of government and to really begin devoting more commensurate amount of resources to a holistic 360-degree coverage of the judiciary in our society, and not just to Congress and the White House, as I think had been the tradition up to that point.
And Megan?
My name's Megan Twohey. I'm an investigative reporter with the New York Times. The story I'm probably most known for was, along with my colleague Jodi Kantor, breaking the Harvey Weinstein story several years ago, which Jodi and I had both done a lot of investigative reporting up until that point, but never had we been part of a story that had such an impact. We could sort of feel the shift almost immediately as our phones and emails got flooded with other women who were coming forward with their stories of abuse and harassment, not just in Hollywood, but in all different industries from all different walks of life. And so we really, like so many people, watched with wonder as the Me Too movement kind of took off. And it was it was so meaningful to us, and we know that it was also so meaningful to so many readers and so many people who participated in that huge social movement that we actually wrote a book about how we did that investigation called She Said, and then had the very surreal experience of having that turned into a movie that came out a couple years ago. So that, and listen, we had also watched as the Me Too movement took, a variety of twists and turns and became complicated, and our response at every turn has been to continue reporting and writing about it.
Thank you. So I started my own life as a journalist, and then I diverted my path and ended up in corporate communications. And as a result of having these dual roles, I get invited to speak to students on campus quite a bit, and usually at the end of a term. So a couple weeks ago, I was invited to speak on campus, and I gave my advice about journalism and going into this profession, and a young man raised his hand at the end. And he said, "Thank you for sharing that all. It's all very interesting." He said, "But I have a question for you. My parents have forbid me from going into journalism because they told me that it's a dead-end career and it's not a job people aspire to any longer." And he said, "What should I do and what do I tell my parents?" Which really goes to the crux of the future of news. What would you all say to an aspiring journalist, a student who is getting confusing inputs and voices? How would you answer that question? Anyone can start.
Well, I mean, first of all, it sounds like you're hearing from this young man what I have heard in the many conversations I've had going to speak on college campuses and also going into high schools. I'd say that what I have witnessed in the last 5 years is just like a huge surge in interest in journalism among young folks. Especially, I would say, young women. I've been really struck by that and so heartened. Jodi and I have spent a lot of time talking to these young folks. In fact, we wrote a younger version of our book called Chasing the Truth for that specific audience, because we were able to see how hungry these folks were. I mean, I think that, there's no question in the last 5 years that that young people can have in some ways like a cynical view of, they've lived through a global pandemic, they've lived through civil unrest, and yet what we have seen is just a ton of people responding to the moment with an interest in wanting to make a difference, and seeing journalism as a way to do that. So I get flooded with those emails every single day. I'm hearing from another young person who's saying, from all different parts of the country, saying, "Can you take the time to talk to me about this?" And so I don't know what the situation is with that parent of that young person, but I would tell them that they need to be paying attention to their kid and to that enthusiasm that they're bringing, because it's certainly inspiring from where I sit. I mean, I just have like I take such comfort in knowing that there's these like younger generations that are so hungry to come in and carry on the traditions that we've been working in.
And we all need to pass that baton to that younger generation. Another voice. How would you answer that question?
As the non-journalist, maybe the least biased of this crew, but also
Who's in an apparently aspirational career path?
Yeah, well, exactly. This is a weird comparison, perhaps, but when we were trying to figure out whether or not we get an animal, because our younger kid really wanted an animal, I asked a friend, and they said, all animals are a ton of work, but pound for pound, you're going to get the most love from a dog, so go for a dog. So I think I'd say to this person, all jobs are a pain, and they're really difficult, but pound for pound, you get the best chance to change the world as a journalist. And I really believe that's true.
Jason?
Yeah, I think the industry has changed in a lot of different ways. And one of them that I've noticed since I started 20 years ago is that you can specialize in things that interest you. And so, when I was coming up, it was very difficult for me to convince an editor that they should send me to the other side of the world to tell stories from a country that we don't have diplomatic relations with, and it's very hard to get into. And I took it upon myself and said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. But these days, if you want to write about video games or another country or some subculture within this country, you can do it if you make yourself indispensable. And I think that passion is something that has run through this industry for a long time, and I think it's more rewarded now maybe than in the past, and that's a good thing.
Let's shift gears just slightly. You're in a room full of business leaders, people who are on the comm side, the marketing side, the nonprofit side. How well do, from your experience, business leaders understand the Fourth Estate? And what's your request, speaking to these business leaders? We've seen the data about advertising and supporting the business model, but what's your advice, not to a student, but to a business leader? And Hannah, why don't we start with you? Put you on the spot.
So I started my career as a fact checker 5 years ago. So what that means is a very specialized position in journalism where you interrogate the sourcing of every claim. It's it feels like you're ripping your molars out. It's like really intense. You're combing over all the data, all the facts. You're interrogating, is this fairly presented? And that's before we're even coming to folks like yourself and like saying, here are our findings. So really having an understanding of that, there is a robust infrastructure around a lot of journalists. It's not just the one person. So many of us are invested in, bringing these claims to light, and it goes through a very rigorous process many times of like, how do we corroborate this information? So I think sometimes when we go to folks asking for those interviews, it can be a little dismissive, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And understandably, but maybe trust that there is an entire ecosystem that is really invested in trying to understand, which can be exciting, and we really want to engage with you to get your perspectives.
Josh, any thoughts?
Yeah, my thought is both on this question and the previous one that we've gone through a period of a couple different things happening. One is sort of polarization and political figures attacking the media. So when parents are saying, why would you want to be a member of the media? It could be because we have people that are, pillaring the mainstream media on a regular basis and using us as foils in the culture. And then, of course, we've seen a massive kind of disruption of the journalism business model over the last 10, 15 years especially. And I guess my message to business leaders would be that we need support for fact-based journalism. There's a lot of content out there. Some of it has nothing to do with news, some of it masquerades as news, and some of it actually is news, and we need people to support those of us that are on the stage that are day-to-day digging on stories that are of real significance. Because if they do get out there, the beauty of social media is that they will be seen, and we're all working across all kinds of platforms to get our content in front of as many eyeballs as possible, but we can't do it if we don't have the support to make the effort to put that news together. And these are not things that are simple, Megan can't do this story she works on in a half hour or an afternoon, and that's the kind of support that we need to do this work.
Well, could one of you define support? I don't think you're speaking just financial to the model. I think you're speaking more broadly and pervasively. What does support mean, support journalism, as a takeaway to the future of news? What do you as journalists need from business leaders? Go for it.
You want me to try? I
Please.
got two different thoughts on this. One is figure out how to support journalism in a way that makes you all money. And there are ways where that's going to work. Sponsor a vertical, sponsor an event, but do it with quality news organizations, partner with them, and figure out a way. We got great salespeople who will work and figure that stuff out in a way that doesn't harm the journalism. And then on the news side, don't hire people like me, like lawyers, when journalists are coming to sort of get at something you all don't want taken and published on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Engage with them. The lawyers screw it up. I'm always getting these complaint letters from lawyers constantly, but they don't really engage on the substance. Engage on the substance is going to be a whole lot better on the other side.
Okay. Let's shift gears once again. Let's talk trust. So there's a lot of studies out there. We've done some. Others have done it on trust. The decline in trust in institutions writ large, decline in trust in news media, in business, in government, in science, you name it. We don't trust anyone, apparently, as a society anymore. You could suggest that's a going out of business strategy for what we all do. What do we do about trust, particularly in a year where more than 50 countries around the world are going to the polls, and we read about misinformation, we read about deep fakes, we read about AI? What do we collectively in this room need to do to restore trust? And why should we care about that so much? And Megan, let's start with you, because I can tell you're itching to. We hit a nerve.
No, it's an important question, and I mean, certainly the issue of trust is one that is being discussed at all levels. In my place of work at the New York Times, I think that it's been, and to piggyback on what Josh was saying about, that we have seen kind of coordinated attacks to undermine the integrity of some of our news organizations. And, listen, we're big kids. We can handle that. It's certainly not deterring us from doing the kind of fact-based, fair, comprehensive journalism that we believe in. I mean, I think that one of the things that we're emerging from this time of transition with a stronger belief in that type of journalism, I think, than ever before. And I think as the world gets increasingly, and the landscape of content becomes more muddied and confusing with AI and with other efforts to produce, quote unquote, fake news, I think that the work that we're doing and that our news organizations are producing is going to be seen as even more valuable. And it's really incumbent. So it's not like a matter of us changing what we do, the day in and day out reporting and writing that we do. But I do think that we are having conversations at the New York Times about how to best communicate that to our readers and to the public. So that's things that happen, like even, you'll see now on the New York Times website, if you click on our stories, you'll see that we've got kind of redone bios in which we seek to explain to our readers exactly who we are and how we work. And I think that that's just, we're now doing videos in which we explain more about the process of how we do what we do. Because it really is a matter of kind of helping to just, I'm not saying, this isn't a matter of just sort of patting ourselves on the back, but I really do think that we are the gold standard of information. And it's really just a matter of, I think that that there are a lot of thoughtful, smart conversations going on about how to kind of best articulate and communicate that to the public and to our consumers.
Jason, as you answer, what's the root cause? Why is trust eroding in journalism, in institutions? What's going on?
Well, first of all, I think that a lot of people do trust what we do, right? Millions and millions of people. And one of the things that I was most proud of was when Evan was arrested, the sort of unified stance that the publishers of the Post, the Times, and the Journal took. We can compete on just about anything, but there are a couple of issues that we can't compete on and should not compete on. One is the safety and viability of what we do, but also, the credibility of our brands. I have no doubt in the quality of the Wall Street Journal or New York Times brands, and we should be more comfortable standing up and saying that, we provide a different product, but it's of a similar quality, and it can be trusted. And I think that that division that exists on social media is going to be exacerbated and grow in the years to come. And we have to take a unified stance as an industry and say, hey, we are all the gold standard together.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about misinformation? Hannah or Jay, what in your newsroom at Business Insider, is misinformation a topic, and is it related to trust, and what do we collectively as journalists and business leaders do about it?
It's absolutely a conversation. It's something that we're thinking about constantly, is how do we counter misinformation? It's something that, AI could end up being this wonderful tool in many ways, but also it is a massive machine that's propagating all of this misinformation into the universe at a scale that I've never seen before. So we're really trying to wrestle with that of how exactly do we counter that. And I think it speaks to what my colleagues are saying, is that our brands become very important, that folks know that they can go to us and trust that we've done the work, that we've vetted, that we've talked to the sources. And that goes to transparency, really talking about how did we come to this position. One of my very favorite things is to include what we call a nerd box on investigations. And a nerd box is like a little paragraph that's like, I spoke with several hundred people and I built this data set with all of these things, and no one wants to read that, but it's an important part of demonstrating our work.
I think they do want to read it.
Well, so there you go.
They do. I think they do.
Yeah, so I think that transparency to readers, that trust building really comes from a better understanding of the journalistic process and what we're endeavoring to do.
Many of you touched on, go ahead.
I want to
Jason.
add one more thing. I mean, I think also we need to do a better job of talking about the quality of the product that we can put out today compared to 20 years ago, the tools that are available to tell stories from around the world, whether it's using open source video and satellite imagery, 1,000 different tools that 20 years ago we couldn't even have imagined using, has made it possible for us to tell stories from every corner of the globe with credibility. And we need to talk about our ability to do that more. I don't think that there's any good reason that people don't trust us.
Let's expand that a little bit more about the tools. And we all talk about AI, and we're going to talk about AI as in the business, but let's talk about AI as it relates to trust. What are the rules of the road in your newsrooms about using AI? And I know some newsrooms are still grappling with it, but as it relates to trust and fair and accurate and transparent reporting, Megan, start with you, New York Times. What can you do and can't do at the New York Times with regard to using AI as a tool?
Yeah, so I'm not going to, listen, I sit in my desk in the investigations unit at the Times. I don't want to speak for our institution, and I can't recite. These are emerging policies, and that our news organizations are rolling out, and they're being done in a very thoughtful and careful manner. And so there's no question that news organizations like the New York Times are looking to figure out how to use AI to help make a more efficient news operation. At the same time, there's also, I think that there's also a recognition that what we do to basically also differentiate ourselves from what AI is producing. what we do in the investigations unit, we can take months and months of interviewing hundreds of people and pouring through thousands of documents and following the footnotes of reports into more reports and into this, into various sourcing. And it is not something, there's just no question that that kind of journalism can be replaced, by AI. And there may be ways that AI can assist here and there, but there's just no question. AI can feel like this very daunting and in some ways, exciting and in some ways scary revolution that's taking place. But as somebody who knows what goes into the work that we do to put out an investigation like the Harvey Weinstein story, I also take comfort in knowing that what we do cannot be replaced. So I think that, I have a lot of confidence that news organizations are going to be able to figure out how to harness the power of AI while also continuing to distinguish, basically to use it as a way to set ourselves apart and to, continue to communicate to our consumers that we are doing something that you can't get anywhere else.
Anyone else? Rules of the road? Politico?
We're following or establishing similar policies to the ones Megan was just talking about. I think a lot of again, I can't speak on behalf of Politico for these policies, but the policies basically revolve in our shop around having a human check on anything before it actually goes up onto the site. And in the instances where there is some kind of AI-related content, to disclose that to readers. There are situations now where we have to cover AI things that are happening in the political sphere. People have probably already heard these stories about robocalls where somebody's voice is just, simulated and things along those lines. This stuff is happening. It's getting into robocalls. It's getting into political advertisements. We've seen mock photographs and mock videos already begin to appear. And the incredible thing about AI is, with the scale and the cost, just how easy it is for somebody who's like a number 4 candidate in some race to make some kind of a video for basically no money that could completely upset the entire contest. So we're trying to deal with how we can use these tools responsibly while also covering the potentially scary, even terrifying uses that can take place in the political sphere.
Got it.
I think one way that it's really helped me personally is in transcription and speed, but I know from dozens of experiences at this point that no transcription of an interview I've done is 100% accurate. And if I were just to, trust the AI and drop that into stories, we'd be in a lot of trouble. So this is still a very collaborative process that requires humans.
We wouldn't do. We just have a few more minutes, and I want to cover the business of journalism. You all are employees of a company that has a business model, and these business leaders have tough businesses. I would suggest yours is even tougher. And can you just remind us of how tough it is to work in journalism today? A lot of you have lost a lot of colleagues, a lot of outlets that you perhaps worked for in the past no longer exist. What is the state of the business model of journalism today, and what really is needed, as Mark said, for it to thrive going forward? And Hannah, why don't we do a lightning round and have you all answer, starting with Hannah. Put you on the spot again.
Sure. So I'm from a very small town in Colorado, and we had one newspaper, and now we have 0 newspapers. And I'm watching a mine go into my hometown that is absolutely, I think I have suspicions based on the color of the water that something is happening with that mine in my community. So that's a really direct and tangible impact of what happens when you remove such a vital institution to a community that needs to reveal that kind of information. And we're seeing that happen across the country. So now I'm fielding phone calls from my neighbors being like, what's going on with this mine? And someone who's a reporter in Brooklyn, can only help so much. So we need those kind of local accountability voices. So that's, I think, a huge challenge.
Your perspective?
Well, I'll just say, I mean, kind of going back to the AI topic, I'd be committing malpractice if I didn't talk about the legal challenges of AI in terms of our content, right? As a business model, if somebody can come and hoover up all of your raw material and then use it, not paying anything for it, I mean, think about that. Not having to worry about guys like Evan who are in prison to hoover up that information, to create that information, or people like Jason who are in prison, or people who put hundreds, if not thousands of hours into long investigatory pieces. You get to just take that and summarize it and take the value of that and pay nothing. That's not going to work. We're all going to be like the humans in WALL-E, floating around, dumb and in a stupor, not knowing anything, thinking that the world is flat and you know, I mean, who knows what. So like we've got to sort of support quality journalism or else there will be no business model. And that means in part licensing content for AI, for training and for output. There's a way to do it and we will get there as an industry because otherwise we're going to be in real trouble.
Love your passion. Jason.
One litmus test for the value of what we do is the sort of attacks that Evan, myself, so many colleagues of mine at the Washington Post, Jamal Khashoggi, Vladimir Karamurza, Austin Tice, have suffered at the hands of authoritarian states. If you care about the way of life that we have in this country, if you care about the future of our democracy, you kind of have to invest in news.
Josh.
Well, first I want to echo what Hannah said about small and medium-sized news organizations because I think they have really faced the brunt of the economic difficulties over the last couple of decades. I'm from Boston, and I remember a time when there used to be, I've been interested in legal coverage for a long time, there used to be reporters in every courthouse ringing the entire city, perhaps 5 or 6 of them. I think you're now lucky to find one person whose assignment it is to cover all of those places. So these are the places that have really struggled. I've also heard statistics. I think another big challenge that we're facing is that many Americans, hopefully not the wonderful people in this room, have never paid for any subscription to any news outlet. I think that's a big problem going forward. You know, even in the old days, people got the newspaper and paid something for it. And people have gotten used to the fact that they're just going to get news for free, and this is I think a problem going forward. So it's very important, especially generationally, for us to convince people that there must be content out there that you're interested in enough to subscribe to, and it's absolutely vital that people do that.
Megan.
Yeah, and I would also echo what you guys said about. I mean, I've been in this business for 25 years. I worked at a daily newspaper in Milwaukee. I worked in Chicago. I have seen some of the newspapers that I worked at, you know, are shells of what they once were. So there's no question that like we have in many cases had a front row seat to the struggles of our industry. That said, I think for those of us who are working at the institutions that are surviving, not only surviving these challenges, but you know, continuing to thrive, that is extremely exciting. And I just want to reiterate how when I walk into the New York Times, one of the things that is so comforting is to just know that there are so many smart people that, and like the journalists, first, you know, I obviously my comrades the journalists, but that there are the brain power that is going into sort of solving these issues of the challenges of AI and beyond, and to see how we like figure out how to incorporate things and then like know how to distinguish ourselves from, you know, the bad things that are happening is just really, I just find it to be really inspiring, and to be somebody for whom this industry continues to, you know, to be willing to invest resources in, to say, listen, I can't be sure exactly what you're going to produce in the next 6 months, but I'm going to give you the resources. I'm going to put you on a plane. I'm going to put you, you know, I'm going to give you some money to, if you need to purchase those records. You know, I think that, and to with the understanding that it can have a payoff, like a story that can help bring about a you know, complete shift in like a social movement. I just think that, yes, it's complicated, and yes, it's messy, and there's some nights that we sort of stay up fretting about all of this, but it's also really, really exciting, and I just continue to wake up every day pinching myself that I get to be part of it.
Well, I will end where we started and applaud each of you. You truly are the role models for this profession. Students do look up to you, and thank you for being the heroes of this industry and the future of news. So some appreciation for our journalists.